Good evening. This is the Select Board's meeting for Wednesday, November 3rd, 2021. This meeting is being held remotely pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency. The act was signed by the governor on June 16th, 2021. My name is Katie Conlon. I'm the chair of the Select Board, and with the other members of the board, please introduce themselves.
Arthur Doyle, Vice Chair.
Mike Zulus, Secretary.
Melinda Collins, member.
And the town administrator.
Mike Dennehy, Town Administrator. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And I know we have several guests here as well from other boards and committees, and we'll get to our part just momentarily. So would everyone please join us in stating the Pledge of Allegiance? We have our flag to put up. Oh, here we go.
Pledge allegiance to the flag.
To
Pledge
the
allegiance to the
of
flag
the United States of America and to the republic
for which it
for
stands,
which it stands, one nation,
under God,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with
with
liberty.
liberty
and
and
justice.
justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. So this is not a regular meeting of the Select Board. This is a special meeting primarily to address the American Rescue Plan Act funds. This is the second meeting that we've had, in which we're going to be soliciting input from the public on the use of the federal American Rescue Plan Act funds, also known as the ARPA funds. And we're going to ask our Finance Committee, which is chaired by Mike Zulus, Arthur Doyle is a member, and the Town Administrator and the Finance Director, Karen Cavallo, members. I know we have representatives of the School Committee, and I saw one of the Park Commissioners, Regina Malley, was here. So there may be other boards that want to speak to items further down on the agenda, but number 3 is a public discussion. And I'm going to turn the meeting over to Mr. Zulus and Doyle and Mr. Dennehy to lead the discussion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What I suggest is, because the primary purpose of this is to get feedback from residents, is to just give a very quick overview of what the American Rescue Plan Act is and what we're seeking input on, and then to seek input from residents for until about 6:30, because our school committee has a meeting at 7 o'clock tonight. So what I would suggest is that we seek public input under item 3 under our agenda until about 6:30, and then move to item 5A, which is the discussion of the American Rescue Plan Act by our board, and the presentation by the schools, and have the schools give us 10 or 15 minutes or so of what their thoughts are, and then if we have more residents, I'd like to try to get residents on as quickly as can. I know the Parks Commissioner is, at least one Parks Commissioner is here, and so we'd want to get them on as quickly as possible as well. But so that's what I propose, if that works, Madam Chair, is to go to item 3, our public discussion, then item 5A, which is the schools, and then perhaps back to item 4, which is the Parks Commissioners, if we don't have any residents waiting.
Okay, I think that plan makes sense. Is that agreeable to the board? Hearing no objection, why don't we do that, Mr. Zulus? So do you want to
All right.
open up number 3?
Sure. So item 3 is a public discussion. So this, as the chair mentioned, this is our second public discussion of the seeking resident input into the American Rescue Plan Act appropriations. Just as a quick recap, as we've mentioned previously in our discussions of this, the town has 2 pots of money, if you will, that it needs to appropriate, that it can appropriate under the American Rescue Plan Act, about $2.8 million directly to the town that will be appropriated by the Select Board as the executive authority of the town, and $5.5 million through the county, that for which the Select Board as the executive authority will determine what projects to seek approval for from the county, because the county has its process. We have $5.5 million allocated to us, to the county, but we have to go through a process with the county to get access to that county. Those projects need to be approved by the county. So those are the two pots of money: $2.8 million, $5.5 million from the county. Those monies will be coming in at various times throughout the next 2 years. And it is up to us to come up with a process for allocating those funds. And since this is atypical for the select board to be appropriating funds, we decided back in late July, early August, to seek as much input from towns, town departments, committees, and the public as possible for the purpose of making those decisions. I will mention that there is one additional pot of money of ARPA funds, and that is through the Massachusetts legislature. And the Massachusetts legislature has about 5.3, I think, billion, not 5.3 million, $5.3 billion to allocate. And as I understand it, the House came up with a plan to allocate about 3.65 billion. Last Monday, Representative Driscoll put in an amendment for $250,000 for municipal broadband for Milton. And on the Senate side, they are Senate, as I understand from Senator Timilty, Senate Ways and Means is coming up with a proposal, and Senator Timilty's office is working on amendments to seek funding, potential amendments for the benefit of Milton through this Friday. I guess they have their deadline for putting in amendments for that money. So that's another opportunity. So with that, very quickly, the general categories that ARPA funds can be used for are support for public health expenditures, including COVID mitigation efforts, medical expenses, behavioral health care. That's one category. 2, address the negative economic impacts caused by the public health emergency, including to harm to workers, households, small businesses. 3, to replace lost public sector revenue. That's a third category, general category. 4th, to provide premium pay for essential workers, offering support for those who, first responders and other infrastructure sectors that responded to COVID. And finally, to invest in water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure investments. Those are generally the broad categories that we're looking for here. So with that, if it pleases the chair, we can open it up for residents to give their thoughts on ARPA spending.
Okay, I think that makes sense. And it looks like everyone who's here is here through video, not through phone. So if any member of the public would like to speak, just please raise your hand and we'll recognize people in order in which they raise their hands. If there's anybody watching on television who wants to call into the meeting, if you do call in, it would be *6 to raise your hand. Okay, I see Mike Dennehy's hand raised, but is that for a procedural point, Mike, before we go to the residents?
No, you can go to the residents. I didn't see any hands raised. I would like to read one into the record that I received from a resident, but you can take Ms. Clifford.
Okay, all right, why don't we go to Joan Clifford? And for anyone who's speaking, if you could, from the public, if you could just say your name and address for the minutes.
Hi, can you hear, sorry, can you hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Okay, Joan Clifford, 21 Hillcrest Road, Precinct 8. I'm speaking on behalf of the Milton Arts Center, just talking about the negative economic impact of the past year on our community programming, representing local artists, musicians, comedians, in terms of not being able to run community programming like the rest of the world. But just interested to find out how to mitigate that. We are maybe running an event next week, but we won't know till it actually runs, because you have to limit tickets because of social distancing. And, you don't really expect to make any money. You're just getting started offering programming again. And I'm not sure about the perimeters of this program in terms of what we have to ask for in terms of documentation. But we are just interested in general in terms of opening a discussion about public art in Milton in general. Like, we never get in touch because it's really just about the fact that money is always an issue. We always realize that Milton does not have the money. And I'm hoping that if there is some money coming in, I know that there's very serious areas that it has to go into, but there's also some really big areas like public art, for instance, in Milton that is never addressed. In other cities and towns, there's a percent for public art. I did join a meeting this past summer for the Rapid Recovery about activating the space for the East Milton deck, proposing the fact that there could be Saturday markets, First Fridays, concerts to bring people into that space. And just talking about this whole area in terms of Milton in general, the fact that arts programming can really help a lot of endeavors going forward in terms of public art. We've had a number of proposals from our teachers who would like to offer programs that potentially could come under this. And we just want to say that we would like to be the arts. We'd like to be recognized. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Joan. Is there anyone else who would like to, oh, Mr. Zulus?
Madam Chair, just for Joan's purposes, Joan, it's probably best for you if you could reach out to either Mike Dennehy or to Karen Praval, who's our finance director in town, and try to quantify what we can accomplish on that score, and how it may fit into one of the categories. Then that may be helpful, because I think, number one, we need to make sure it fits within the category, and number two, we need to have a way to quantify it, particularly if it's going to be a request for the county. So I'd reach out to either Mike or Karen or both to do that. Sorry, Mike, I don't mean to put that on you, but
No,
Okay,
that was going to be my recommendation.
we
Secretary
can
Zulus, yeah.
definitely, thank you.
Yeah.
We can definitely do that. Thanks.
Next, we have Marie Dambrouche.
Hi, my name is Marie Dambrook, and I live at 21 Hillcrest.
I'm having a little trouble hearing you. I don't know if everyone else is. I'm turning my volume up, but if you could maybe get a little closer to your microphone, that would help.
Sure. I will raise my volume as well. So I am speaking also in support of the Milton Arts Center. I am a teacher there. I have taught there since 2018. I also grew up in Milton. Yesterday I attended a training specifically geared towards artists about these funds, and how it is really important for us to understand that while these funds need to go to public health efforts and many other things, this is a really incredible opportunity for us to sort of imagine public space and community projects that can really improve our quality of life. I was just hoping to share a few thoughts on that. While I'm in support of supporting art, I am also believe that public space, we need to activate public space, and that falls under addressing negative economic impacts. A lot of things have turned online. I think a lot of people are isolated, and there is a fallout of community. And so I think it is important for possibly for these funds to go to activating public space. That could be seen in the form of creating gathering spaces, creating outdoor classrooms, It could also be seen in beautification, thinking about using road medians and unused space for pollinator gardens. Another eligible use is investing in water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. And I was hoping to bring up the idea of rain gardens, which take polluted water runoff from streets and cycle through it to be brought into sewer systems in a cleaner fashion. So yeah, I think we should use this money to create educational resources for our town outside of schools, for the public, and create better public spaces, whether that be through public art or gardens. And yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anyone else from the public who would like to be heard on the ARPA funding? Well, it's only 6:16, but maybe the thing to do would be to go on to the school presentation, and then we'll come back to the public if anyone should join the meeting later and like to weigh in. Mr. Dennehy, did you have a comment before we do that?
I do, Madam Chair. So on Friday, I received an email from a resident, Steve Frizzetti, who is suggesting that we use ARPA funding to pay the health insurance premium for town employees, if allowed, and allocate any funds already allocated back to the general fund and reduce taxes. Additionally, he's asking to put the money in water and sewer, stormwater enterprise funds, and lower the water, sewer, and stormwater rates.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dennehy. Okay, then, Mr. Zulus, should we go on to the school presentation? We'll move up item 5A.
With seeking the indulgence of Regina Malley and Bonnie DeVore, I think because the school committee has their own meeting at 7, it would be good to go to item 5A and then maybe back to item 4.
Okay. All right, if there's no objection from the board, then seeing none, we will do that. So I'm not sure who, as we have several school committee members here. Margaret is the chair of this, Margaret Eberhard is the chair of the school committee. Why don't I recognize Margaret, and she can introduce whoever may wish to speak.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Margaret.
And good evening to the select board and all the community members attending this meeting this evening. We have several school committee members here. We also have Assistant Superintendent Amy Dexter, and we have some of our finance members here, Beverly Ross Denny and Betty White, and Principal Karen McDavitt to answer any questions about the requests that we are making. So Assistant Superintendent Dexter, would you like to speak and address the committee?
Yes, please. Would it be okay, Chair Conlon, if I share my screen?
Sure, so long as you know how to do that, because I'm not really adept at that.
I'm hoping I do. Let's see.
That's enabled.
Hold on.
It's enabled, I think, at the bottom.
Hold on. Trying to find it.
It's right up at the top there. Oh,
Yeah, I have it. I'm just trying to find where the
no, that looked like the slides were right at the top. See at the top
oh, I
there?
can't
Below.
see. Oh, there we go. Here we go. Okay.
Go over one. There you go.
I can't get to that tab. There we oh no, I can't get to that tab. Sorry. I can't see it on my screen.
And when I know Zoom is not the format the district uses
no.
most of the time,
There we go. Okay.
but now we can't see
So-
the screen anymore.
Now can you see it?
No, we lost.
We lost you.
Okay. Okay, I can see it now. Hold on.
We'll
a
go back to
second.
the bottom and share screen again.
So
And then if you open,
Sorry.
it, that's okay. So where we living now?
now can you see it?
There you go.
All
Yes,
right, so
I think there's a way to enlarge it. That would be,
Yep.
I think if you go to the slideshow part.
now,
yep, that's great.
okay.
Bravo.
I'm on the wrong page, but hold on a second.
Go back one.
Okay, so I'm presenting at this time on behalf of Superintendent Jett, as he had a prior commitment. He's hoping to pop on if he arrives home before this is done. So I'll try to make it short and sweet, but Milton Public Schools is submitting 4 projects under the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA, for consideration of funding. Basically, the 4 projects are, project 1 is student social emotional learning. Project 2 is school nursing support. Project 3 is enhanced expanded educational support. And project 4 is school building ventilation improvements. I also have on the very last side some other future potential requests that at this time, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on that. We're projecting these needs over the next 3 fiscal years. The balance of fiscal 22, 6 months. This represents 6 months of expenses. And over fiscal 23 and 24, as we feel the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic has had a negative impact on our students, and that these needs will be for the next few fiscal years. The first project, student social emotional learning. This includes a request for a 1 pre-K through 12 behavioral health social emotional learning specialist, 1 middle school guidance adjustment counselor, and an increase in the kindergarten aides from 26 hours per week, which is a 0.8 FTE, to 32.5 hours a week. The total costs, including benefits, related health insurance benefits, and the MTRS surcharge of 9%, is $751,145 over the 3 years. We feel that this is an eligible use of the fund as it supports the public health response, and it's an enhanced educational supports to mitigate the impacts of the pandemic. We believe it falls under the subcategories of evidence-based practices to address social, emotional, mental health needs of the students, support for those individuals in isolation and quarantine, and addressing the mental health concerns caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. The next slide is just a detail of how I calculated the costs, but I'm not going to go into a long discussion about that, but it's there for your reference. Project 2 is school nursing support. Basically, we're looking for a full-time school nurse that would be utilized district-wide, that would assist with the response to the pandemic and COVID-19 through testing, contact tracing, public health surveillance. We believe this is an eligible use of the funds as it falls under the categories of COVID-19 mitigation and prevention and support of the public health response. The total cost for this school nurse, including health insurance benefits and the MTRS surcharge, would be $235,573 over those fiscal years that I mentioned earlier. Again, just the budget for that project. Project 3 is enhanced expanded educational support, basically to mitigate the negative impact of the COVID pandemic on our student learning. We'd like to provide some enhanced and expanded educational support to students. In order to do that, we believe we are requesting for the 22 to 24 academic years, 1 additional elementary reading specialist, 1 elementary math interventionist, 1 high school math teacher, and 1 special ed education support staff. We believe this falls under the eligible use of funds under the category of enhanced and expanded educational supports, subcategory evidence-based educational services and practices to address the academic needs of our students. The total amount for these 4 positions over the balance of academic year 22 through 24 is approximately $892,290. Again, that includes the 4 full-time positions and all related health insurance benefits and MTRS surcharge. Budget for that project. And then project 4 is school building ventilation improvements. These items are currently on Bill Ritchie's capital requests that are going to be submitted later in the budget process, but we felt that this would be a category that would fall as eligible under ARPA. We'd like to request funds of $325,000 to make ventilation improvements in all of the Milton Public School buildings in order to meet the pandemic operational needs and mitigate spread. This, we believe, falls under the eligible use of funds as supporting the public health response and making major efforts to prevent COVID-19 spread. Subcategories, capital investments in public facilities to meet pandemic operational needs and to mitigate spread. The budget, and then just some other future requests that I wasn't going to go into a lot of detail at this meeting because I'd like to focus on the 4 larger projects for consideration at this time. So that's all I have. I tried to make it short and sweet, but be happy to answer any questions from the board, probably with the support of the school committee members and Principal McDavitt. I'm going to stop sharing my screen if that's okay.
Amy, I was just going to chime in and add that we certainly have a copious amount of data that can support the need for some of these requests, and we're happy to send along. In particular, we have data around the current state of our students and their mental health. So I'm happy to speak a little bit more to that if anyone is interested, but also wanted to offer that we can send along data, current data that will support the need for the instructional support positions as well as the social, emotional, and mental health positions.
Well, thank you all. Before we go to any questions from our board, is there anyone else from the schools who wanted to speak? Margaret?
I don't think so. I just want to thank Assistant Superintendent Dexter and Principal McDavitt for coming this evening to present the information. I don't know if anyone from finance had anything they wanted to say.
Yeah, I just want to add on to what Karen McDavitt said. We were very fortunate that last school year, the district started administering some district-wide assessments, both in math and English language arts, as well as they found an instrument that would allow them to gauge the mental health of our students. And during school committee meetings in the winter of 2020 and the spring, 2021 and spring of 2021, we were able to see that there was significant need around unfinished learning. That's essentially because the school year was shortened and we didn't have full days of instruction because of the pandemic. There were certain components of the curriculum that just couldn't be covered because there wasn't time. And what we're seeing in the data, and it was presented earlier this spring, was that there are significant gaps in student learning because there was content that could not be delivered. And it bore itself out in the MCAS scores that all of you, if you have a child within the Milton Public Schools, you probably received an email from Superintendent Jett with our district MCAS data relative to what's happening in the state. So we know that there are needs that are currently cannot be met with the traditional resources that have been available in schools. And we've had principals make requests for specific specialists that will work directly with students in order to complete that learning that they didn't get. In addition, the mental health instrument that was administered in the spring showed for the secondary level, students feeling that they needed assistance, whether they didn't feel comfortable in school or they needed the assistance of an adult. I'm not using the right terminology. I'm sure Karen can speak to this much better than I can. But we also know that in the community, there's a shortage of mental health specialists. So for our students who went into the pandemic with normal rates of need, those needs were exacerbated by the time they were out of school. And what we're hoping to do by bringing in an additional counselor as well as that specialist is that they will supplement the staff that we have now so that we can address the mental health crisis that has been brought upon us by the pandemic. And the fear is if we don't put these things in place, what will ultimately happen is the needs will just get greater. So I'm hoping that this particular ask is funded because it's something that is, and it's a resource that we didn't anticipate, but now can do a lot of good to stop the slide that we've seen. And as Karen mentioned, we do have those slides. They were shared publicly during school committee meetings, and we're happy to distribute them to members of the select board.
And if I could just add on, Beverly, just to throw out two basic statistics. The latest shows that 70 to 80% of students across the country who require mental health support and intervention only get those supports and interventions through schools. So 80% of our kids who need that support, the only opportunity they have is through our adjustment and guidance counseling staff who have access to them during the school day and can provide that support. And the other statistic I would throw out there for your review is that the recommended ratio for students to adjustment counselors is 1 to 250. And if you use Glover School as an example, I have 1 for 630. So statistically, we certainly have some work to do to bridge the gap between what we know is best for our students and what we currently are able to offer them. So I just wanted to add that in.
Thank you very much. And I think it would be helpful to get those slides that Bev mentioned. If someone could send those over to Mike Dennehy, he can distribute them to the board. Betty has her hand raised, and then we can see if any of our members have comments or questions.
So I just want to piggyback on what Karen McDevitt said, because, you know, I was a mental health provider in a school setting last year, and I know that many, particularly the younger children up through maybe grades 5 and 6, they were not very successful with their mental health providers on an outpatient basis in a remote format. It just didn't work for them. So I, just in my own work, I remember getting dozens of phone calls from mental health providers who were seeing our students when I worked in Dedham, who said, you know, he's not engaging, she's not engaging, it's not working out. So basically, I became the person who was providing the only mental health services that some of these very complicated kids were getting, and it was difficult. So I think that many districts are adding mental health support to their budgets because of the enormous needs. And the other thing I was going to ask Amy to do, maybe in a summary slide, is to, if you could break down the financial piece of this from, like, you have it over several years, which I think is what we're needing, but if you could sort of think about it each year, what we're requesting, because I don't know if the county is going to be looking for the funding allocated for the fiscal year or for the you know, not the entire project, but maybe just for the fiscal year.
Amy?
So I have that information. I just didn't include it in the PowerPoint, but I have it as like a supplemental Excel schedule that breaks it down. Actually, on those budget pages that I flipped through quickly, it shows the breakdown between fiscal year. And then I also have one that brings all the projects together and shows the total by year that way. So I can share all of that with the select board, town administrator Dennehy, and finance director Praval later on this evening. When I jump off of the school committee meeting, I'll email that out, the presentation, including the supplemental schedule, to all of the school committee also.
Great, thank you very much, Amy. Does any member of our board have any questions or comments for the school committee while they're here before they go off to their meeting? Mr. Zulus?
Well, yeah, I do have one, and that is, given that this is limited funding in over 2 years, I would ask, just as I would, I think, any department that looking for personnel, to think about contracting or consulting as opposed to hiring, because these, as I said, these funds are only available for well, actually, this year, next year, and the year after, so 2.5 years. So given that the funding terminates at that period, you might think about looking at these services in terms of contracting and consulting at this point rather than hiring, because we don't have, I mean, it wouldn't be in the budget, in the operational budget at this point. So that's just one thought. And then, Amy, you're going to send the presentation that you gave tonight as well. Is that right? You're gonna,
yes,
that'd be great if you. Okay, great.
And then
that'd be great.
just as a follow-up to your comment, we'll definitely look into that. And what we normally do with grant funded positions, if approved, we would post them as such, showing that it was only a 1-year position or a 2-year position, so that any potential applicants would know that it is not a permanent position within our budget.
And then one additional thought is to think about the timing as well. And because of there's got to be some coordination on the timing, as I think Betty may have suggested or Beverly suggested, because when we get the funding in and when it's needed, we're going to have to be very deliberate about timing of any project, including anything that's allocated here. So,
Arthur? You're on mute, Arthur.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mike underscored the point that I had asked to raise, and that was the timing issue. We have about $2.2 million in requests here, and we have no experience in working yet with Norfolk County in terms of the submission and their response timetable. So it will be incumbent upon us to move as quickly as possible with any requests that are going to be submitted to the county for the $5+ million that's available through that resource. We should also mention that of the $1.4 million previously allocated by the federal government to the town of Milton, that $1 million of that is already encumbered, so that there's a balance remaining of roughly $444,000 in that first package. We'll receive another 1.44 later on. And also, the county money is staggered over quarters. So we're going to have to look at what the priorities are and how your priorities would fit by quarter as identified by the county, so that there's a nice match and we avoid any mismatches and prolongations of applications and things of that nature. So we have a little bit of homework to do as well. I just wanted to also mention for the public that we do have information on the town website, and it would be very helpful for you to take a look at that. If you have any suggestions or ideas about how we can improve it, we most welcome that. And it will be updated on an ongoing basis for the general public as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Doyle. Any other questions or comments? Ms. Dexter?
I want to thank the select board for consideration of the requests of the school. We know that although it seems like a lot of money, there's a lot of asks. So just want to thank you in advance for your consideration.
If I can just second that as the person who works with the kids every single day, I can promise you, and it's a personal promise, you can come find me if I fault on it. I can promise you that we would not be asking for these things if we did not need them. And I will sleep better at night as an elementary school principal if I knew that in particular, we were meeting the mental health needs of our students. So.
Thanks, Karen. And Susan knows, but if I do.
I was going to say, Arthur Doyle, can you give Susan a big hug for me?
I will. Thank you.
So do we, anything else for the school representatives? I have one question. It might be, it's not something for tonight, but maybe the finance committee of the select board of the school committee could meet and discuss that. But I know there are ESSER funds are available to the schools, and I think it would be helpful for us to know what the plan is for spending of those funds, because obviously we're going to have a lot of demands for the limited ARPA funds. We have the park commissioners here for a request. We've got the Board of Health, the Council on Aging, and other departments that are looking also at submitting requests. So I think it would be helpful for us to know, is that personnel or what might that be directed at? And again, we don't need to get into that this evening, but I think the finance committee could explore that further so that we're, in case, I don't know whether there'd be any reporting or anything we'd have to do for this county or let them know what we're using other funds for. Maybe we won't, but I think it would be helpful for our board to know that at a later date.
We can certainly get that information for you. I think making like a nice spreadsheet with buckets of money and how all the money was spent and in what categories it would be very helpful to all of us, actually. So,
Yes, and probably the warrant committee as well, because we've told them we're going to keep them in the loop with whatever our plans are. We've already had at least one meeting with them where we've talked about the ARPA funds. So that would be helpful to everybody. Thank you.
thank you, Chair Conlon and Mr. Zulus and the select board for having us tonight and for considering our requests and for all your support of the school during this very difficult time for everyone.
Okay, thank you. All right, then I think we're finished with 5A and we can go back to item 3 and see if we have a few people who've joined the meeting since we were on item 3. Maybe we'll return to item 3 and we'll ask if there's anyone else from the public who would like to speak on item 3, which is a public discussion of the American Rescue Plan Act funds and any suggestions for use or questions regarding the funds. So why don't we give people a chance if they want. If you'd like to speak, please raise your hand and we'll ask you for your name and address for the minutes, and happy to hear your thoughts on the ARPA funds. I don't see any hands raised at this time. I don't see anyone on the telephone. Okay, so then if not, I think we can go on to number 4, which is the Park Commissioner's request for recreation management software as an ARPA-funded project. So I know we had Regina Malley, the Park Commission, Board of Park Commissioners, and Bonnie DeVore, the Park Department.
Yep. And Bonnie's going to do this presentation. Bonnie's been the driving force behind this and all of the research and hard work that's gone into it. So I'll hand it over to Bonnie.
Okay, thank you, Regina Malley, and thank you for joining us this evening. Bonnie, welcome.
Thank you, Regina, and thank you, Select Board and Mike, for having us here tonight. So just I'll make it also as brief as possible. Just to bring you up to speed, just to make you a little bit familiar, and most of you may know already that we use Unibank as our way for residents to sign up for programs and pay for the programs. And Unibank has been great, but Unibank is a bank, and for the most part, that's how they function with bankers' hours, etc. And the work they have done for us has been a far reach from what they were actually designed to do. And like I say, they've been wonderful, but the needs of the department have outgrown what they are able to provide for us at this point on the technology end. We have been researching the rec management software for well over a year and been in on several informational meetings with companies that had wonderful software, but it was extremely expensive. So the town of Milton currently has Civic Plus that hosts our website, and Civic Rec is a module of Civic Plus so we already have that software in place. So being that we already have it and this being a module, it is much less expensive and more attainable for purchase. So the new software would provide us with the ability to go live with programs after hours of 5 p.m., thus creating a more equitable platform with access for all at any time of day when they come home from work or the middle of the day, whenever it could work out best. We would be able to provide a better time for everyone to have access to register when a program goes live. The software would also provide more transparency to parents with respects to wait lists, would be automated. Families could create a family profile that would give them the ability to view programs that they have signed up for or print receipts and get reimbursement or for tax purposes. The software could be used for the Teen Center and our middle school ID program with the ability to print IDs. So at a recent Parks Commission meeting, we had in a member of the Equity and Justice Committee, and they presented some recommendations for consideration to the board. This would also address some of their concerns in ask also. And the other applications in this software could be used down the line for monthly calendars and park scheduling and signups, etc. And we would actually appreciate the consideration for the allocation of some of the funds to pay for this particular software to bring the technology end of the Parks and Recreation Department into the 21st century.
Thank you very much, Ms. DeVore. We appreciate that presentation and all the written information you've given us. Does anyone on the board have any questions for the Parks Department about the request? Or does the Finance Committee have any discussion on this item? Mr. Dennehy.
Madam Chair, thank you.
Oh,
And thank you, Bonnie and Regina, for presenting. I did speak with Rob Mallett, who's our interim IT director on the town side. He says that this matches up very well. As Bonnie said, Civic Rec is another module for Civic Plus. So I would be fully supported with the current software application that we have working on the town side.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Denny. Mr. Doyle and then Ms. Collins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to confirm the total amount of funds being requested in the public meeting, please. I may have missed it.
Sure, it was $11,000 upfront for the first year, and then a maintenance fee for each additional year between $6,000 to $7,000.
Thank you.
Ms. Collins, I'm sorry, are you finished, Mr. Doyle? Do you have enough follow-up question? Okay, Ms. Collins.
Ms. DeVore actually answered my question. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. All right, I see Mr. Dennehy's hand raised. I also see Mr. Zulus' hand raised.
Member Zulus first.
No, you were first, Mike. You go ahead.
No, I just think it would be a good idea to support this project for the 3 years of the ARPA funding. Obviously there'll be some learning to get this software application installed for the busiest time, but I think it would be, I don't think it would be punitive financially to ask for the ARPA funding to support the first 3 years of this software application module.
Mr. Zulus?
So yeah, I wanted to drill down on the requested appropriation here. So I see the project cost of 11,000 for year one, 11,211 in the under the documents we got, I think, from Bonnie. So 11,211 for year one. And then I see it says year two recurring services 7,509.
75.
So are we 77,509? So is the idea, Bonnie and or Mike or Regina, is the idea to appropriate the 11,211 now and seek that from the county, or to appropriate that, seek that from the county, and also to appropriate for years 2 and 3, and to do that either through the county or through the direct funds? And maybe we don't know the answer. Maybe the answer is just the 11,211 from the county at this point. But that's what I just want to make clear where we're seeking it, as opposed to not whether it's through the bucket directly to the town or through the county. I think we're doing the county on this one. And then are we going to appropriate the years 2 and 3 now? And if so, from what bucket?
If it could be appropriated from the county, that would be great. So I would seek that for us, for our department.
The years 2 and 3.
Yes.
Or okay.
Correct. So the upfront cost in the year 2 and 3 maintenance fee.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Mr. Dennehy.
Yes, I would agree. Due to the fact that this is going to be a grant application process through Norfolk County by myself and the Director of Finance, I think it would be easier to do all 3 years at once for that funding source, understanding that there's multiple projects that will undoubtedly be applied for through Norfolk County. And I think it would be a bit more tedious to do that 2 more times if we don't draw off the direct funds from the U.S. Treasury. So I would appreciate that.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Collins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure that this is the right time for this question, but just listening to Mr. Zulus and Mr. Doyle talk about timing, I was just wondering, Mr. Dennehy, if you had any better sense of how long the county thinks it will take to review grant applications as they come in. Of course, realizing that if it's a complex application, it may take longer. This one seems pretty straightforward compared to something like a construction project or something, but just wondering if you had any idea.
I'm sorry, Member Collins, I don't. I tuned into the Norfolk County Commissioners meeting today and just missed their agenda item on ARPA. It's my understanding that there haven't been any applications filed yet. Could we get this ball rolling? It could be that Milton would be the first application received by the county tomorrow to do just that, kind of get a estimate of what it's going to take and the complexities of each application.
Great, thank you.
Any other comments or questions on the park request? Mr. Zulus.
So just again on the amounts, I'm getting 11,211 for this year for the investment, purchasing the software, getting it going. 7,509 for year 2, 7,509 for year 3, for a grand total with my math of 26,229. I get a thumbs up from Mr. Dennehy. I'm gonna take that to the bank.
That's correct.
Okay, you get a thumbs up from Ms. DeVore also on your math.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you. Has the Finance Committee already discussed this, and is there a position, or is there, what is the next step that you'd like us to consider?
Madam Chair, we discussed it. We didn't vote on it. I think the discussion was favorable among the Finance Committee, so it's on for discussion approval this evening. So you know, it's my view, and Arthur can certainly weigh in. It's my view that if the members are comfortable taking a vote on it, I certainly am. So I'll defer to Arthur and the other board members.
Madam Chair, I concur with Mr. Madam Chair, I concur with Mr. Zulus, and accordingly, I would move approval of the recreation management software as an ARPA-funded project as submitted by the Board of Park Commissioners.
Second.
Okay, any discussion on the motion? Seeing none.
Just Madam Chair, I think Ms. DeVore made a really good case on the transparency, on the access, and on the fact that this satisfies or addresses some of the concerns raised by the Equity and Justice Committee. So I think this satisfies a lot of it's a small investment and satisfies a lot of need.
Okay, thank you. I agree. And I see Ms. Collins nodding as well, so it sounds like she's in agreement. Any other discussion on the motion? Seeing none, then all in favor, Mr. Doyle.
Yes.
Mr. Zulus.
Yes.
Ms. Collins.
Yes.
And myself, yes. All right. Thank you very much to
Great,
Mr. Wheeler
thank
and
you.
Ally. We appreciate your time tonight. And thank you for putting
Thank you, Select Board. Thank you, Mike.
and thank you for all the
Yeah.
work putting this together.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, so we finished number 4. We're back to number 5. We've covered 5A for the schools. We also have on the agenda the Municipal Broadband Committee and the Department of Public Works and any other project uses that you wish. I don't see any additional members of the public having joined us, but if there is anyone who's watching on television and you'd like to weigh in on the use of the funds, please feel free to join us before the meeting ends, and maybe we'll go back to item 3. If there's anyone else who would like to speak. So, Mr. Zulus.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I see Mr. Lynch, I believe it's Mr. Lynch from our Broadband Committee on the line as well. Two things. One is to follow up on the presentation of at town meeting. I won't go through it again. I think the bottom line was that it was the view of the Broadband Committee that replacing the town's INET infrastructure now using the cable-related funds and ARPA funds at no cost to the taxpayer is a need, and it's a great opportunity. And it would provide the town with a quote-unquote future-proof network, and it would allow the town to control its own destiny with respect to connectivity and bandwidth going forward. As everyone here knows, town meeting approved the appropriation from the cable-related fund in the amount of $350,000 by a vote of us, I think about 86% of town meeting members. That presentation included the idea that we, the Broadband Committee, would be requesting ARPA funds to make up the difference. And then on Monday morning, the Broadband Committee voted to seek the additional funding for the INET through the ARPA funds. So this isn't on for approval tonight, but I think we wanted to plant the seed, and our committee is moving forward with an RFP, given the positive vote that we had at town meeting. And so I think before any RFP could issue, we'd have to have a funding source. So we'd probably seek the funding source at that point. And so that's all I think I need to say on broadband, although I'd ask Mr. Lynch if he wants to add anything from our committee.
Yeah, just very quickly, I think I would say that, this project is going to support a number of institutions in the town. So it's going to be, supporting Milton, Access TV, the schools, and our first responders as well. So it's, we've heard some very important needs tonight as well, but this is one that touches many areas of the town. So we think it's a very important need.
Thank you, Mr. Lynch. Any questions or comments on broadband? And if not, we can move into Public Works. So it can be Mr. Zulus or Mr. Dennehy.
I can take this, Madam Chair, Mr. Zulus, if you want. So very briefly, and I can pull up a screen if you want, but DPW has several shovel-ready projects. And again, thank you to this board for the execution of the first $1 million of ARPA funding for a water main project that's taking place currently. Most of the projects they're talking about are water main and drain sewer projects. One project of particular note would involve the assessment, design, and construction repair of the Harlan Street culvert, which was identified and prioritized in the 2020 municipal vulnerability preparedness process. But essentially, they've got a bunch of shovel-ready projects, and I would love to have, obviously we're still working through the process of this, but I think it would behoove Director Berkeley and Town Engineer Marina Fernandez to come in and speak to some of these specifically. They do have a priority list, but it's approximately $4 million that the projects they've identified. There is more. Again, Marina Fernandez and Chase Berkeley have talked in the past about the pavement summary report and the field study that was done on the sewer and water infrastructure in our town and the need to replace so much of it because some of it is so old. So I would request formally that they come to either this Friday's Finance Committee meeting generally or at a future Finance Committee meeting to present, and then come to this board specifically, knowing that there's so much work to do in the public works realm. But to Mr. Lynch's point and schools earlier in the Parks Department, and Council on Aging and others that we can touch upon, there's so much of a need and demand for this money, this $8 million, little over $8 million, that they're aware that they're not going to be the exclusive recipient of this. So again, there are some projects I'll share my screen quickly here just to identify some of the projects here. If you can see my screen. There's a drain and sewer rehab project that's ready to go out to bid in the area behind Town Hall. There's another sewer rehab project that's ready to be queued up. All the engineering work and design has been done on these. If you recall, the Randolph Sewer Betterment Project, there's an investment that the town has to make in that process. That is nearly ready. There's some resident input that needs to take place on that, but you know, our pump stations are always in need of rehabilitation throughout town. There's some pavement work and some planning, metering flow and construction that needs to be done. But again, probably more specific and a deeper dive and a reprioritization from the Public Works folks if they could come to this board and start with the Finance Committee.
Thank you. Yes, I think it would be best to start with the Finance Committee because the board's approach has been to let the Finance Committee be the committee that's vetting the requests and making recommendations to the board. So I think that's the right place to start. But does anyone have any comments for Mr. Dennehy or questions on these projects? Okay, thank you. Then if not, any other projects? And we do have some requests from the Health Department, the Council on Aging, the Planning Department, a few others. The Treasurer that we've received copies of. I don't know that anything is ready to be submitted at this stage, but or I don't know if they've been presented to the Finance Committee. Mr. Doyle has his hand raised. Mr. Doyle, you're on mute.
I keep doing that to you. I'm so sorry. I want to thank you and ask if when the Public Works engineering projects come before the Finance Committee that we have a good understanding of the priorities, the timing of each as it would be and the funding source that is recommended for each of the projects. Would that be possible, Mike?
Yes, and that's a great point because the timing of this will run into different fiscal years, obviously. So that's a very good point. I appreciate that, and they are ready to do that. I just wanted to kind of introduce some of the other stuff, knowing that the water main project that was funded with the first amount of ARPA money going out the door was very specific. So I'd like to see the same thorough content presented to the Finance Committee and then this board subsequently.
Thank you.
Mr. Zulus.
So just as a precursor of and to give you a little of something to think about on these requests. The Board of Health has presented requests of about $500,000, a little over $500,000 over the 3 years, which includes a community health assessment, social worker, contract tracers, and booster clinics, public health nurse. We've had requests from the COA for a passenger bus, health and wellness classes, meditation classes, and there may be a request from the planning department on a local rapid recovery plan, so. You know, the school request is about 2.5 million. Broadband is 950,000. DPW has another 4 million, and there may be additional requests as well. So I guess my message is there are going to be some decisions that need to be made here with respect to this funding. So.
Well, and to that point, Mr. Zulus, you mentioned that Senator Timilty had indicated that the state house, the House and the Senate are working on the state funding. And shortly before the meeting, Senator Timilty reached out to me and said that Friday at noontime was the deadline to submit amendments and that we might want to come up with a combined list. I know that Representative Driscoll already has a request for 250 for broadband. So I responded to Senator Timilty and told him we had a meeting tonight. We'd be talking about ARPA. And we may want to identify some items. Obviously, we need to be reasonable, and there's no guarantee that any of them, including the broadband, will get into the final bill, but we have an opportunity to submit some requests to Senator Timilty for some amendments that he would need to submit by Friday at noon. So I know our finance committee is meeting Friday morning. Maybe that's something that we could talk about it tonight and come up with a list, or we could maybe identify it. Actually, Friday morning might be a little bit late to get them into him by noon.
Madam Chair, my suggestion is to send Senator Timilty's office and Senator Timilty what we have. And
universe, all of the
you
requests.
know, and certainly he can use his judgment and his office's judgment in terms of what they can pursue, and perhaps be in touch with Mr. Dennehy as well in coordinating that. That would be my suggestion, because as you say, you know, if finance comes up with something Friday morning, it'll be just finance. It won't be our board en masse, and it'll put them under a lot of pressure if it's Friday morning as well. So.
Well, why don't we send in the school? I think that's a good idea. So why don't we send the school requests as well as the public works and the other requests? And maybe we could ask Mr. Dennehy to try to prioritize them for, I know the schools have already prioritized their requests, but why don't we try to prioritize the DPW request, which is what Arthur had just asked for the finance meeting. Why don't we try to do that for Senator Timilty as well, and then see what he thinks is worth him submitting. If we can fund some of this through state funding, that's great. That just gives us some additional resources. But he did emphasize, you know, no guarantees. There's a lot of communities and a lot of requests. So we'll see what we're able to do. Mr. Doyle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to admit that's going to be the hard work of the Finance Committee and ultimately the decision making of the Select Board. And it shouldn't be easy. There will undoubtedly be many more projects than there will be funding for. And having as much homework done as early as possible, as everybody is suggesting here in this conversation, will be extremely helpful in garnishing whatever state funding we can get through the good auspices of Representative Driscoll and Senator Timilty. So early on, as Mr. Dennehy and others of us have been saying, the better.
Okay, so is that agreeable to everyone, that we'll ask Mr. Dennehy to submit the requests to Senator Timilty, and we'll see what can be prioritized and let the senator's office decide what they think is worth submitting, and then we'll go through our normal process for the Finance Committee prioritizing requests. Okay. And do we have anything else on ARPA before we have the dashboard as item 6? Is there anything else on item 5?
Madam Chair, if I may, you may go back to see if we have any members of the public who want to weigh in. You may want to go back to item 3 briefly if we have time. So I thought I saw another member of the public come in, but maybe not.
We just had one who came in and then left. So is there anyone else? Is there anyone?
Maybe they might have been looking for the school committee.
Yeah, that could be. Okay, I'll keep an eye on the participant list. If we see anyone, we can go back to 3. Why don't we go into item 6 then, which is the ARPA dashboard. Mr. Dennehy, is that something you're going to speak to?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to share my screen here. So a lot of work's been done the last couple of weeks with Rob Mallett. That's not it. Let's see. Bear with me one sec. Rob Mallett and Karen Paval have been working on the dashboard. They presented it to the Finance Subcommittee recently. Let me see where it is here. Sorry. Of course, I can't find it. It is. Bear with me one second. There it is. Okay. Yeah. So this is part of the town's ClearGov, which is a link at the bottom of the townofmilton.org. We have the ability to add projects to this. So it's been a work in progress. We received comment from the Finance Committee members. Basically, it's the CARES Act didn't ask us to be as transparent with the dollars and how they were spent. It was a reimbursement program where the town would seek qualifications for projects, spend the money, and then get a reimbursement. This we have to qualify for prior to, so we're being very transparent. So, and again, this is a work in progress. I wanted to present to this board tonight for any comments before we go live with it. But basically, if you can see my screen properly, we're showing the two separate buckets of ARPA funding. We've got the U.S. Department of Treasury. The amount allotted is that 2.88 number that Vice Chair Doyle mentioned. I received 1.4 of that, and then it shows the outstanding balance. So this basically gives a customer or a taxpayer a look at what the town has received and is to receive. We then show links to Norfolk County ARPA. We talk about the eligible use of the funds. If you click on any of these links, you'll get a lot of information as to what qualifies and what doesn't qualify. But it's a pretty useful tool that we're able to enable through our ClearGov product. This is what a lot of the communities are using for dashboards. Unfortunately, we are unable to link a source for people to suggest comments to this because on ClearGov currently, and we've put in a request for them to kind of create a workaround or a module that will allow us to have residents reach out to us. So we will share this link with another link with my credentials so that people can submit stuff, continue to submit stuff to the town. This meeting is great for that, but some people choose to do it through email like Mr. Frizzetti, or we've seen other communities receive a lot of emails. So this is what it looks like here. Arthur and Mike, if you want to weigh in, there were some changes that were made since you last saw it, but it basically gives people an idea of what's going on. It tells you when approximately some of the money will be coming in again. If I scroll down a little further, it talks about, like I said, the use of the funds, but we also will start listing the projects that have received funding. So earlier I mentioned the water main project 21-1, which received $1 million. That mentions that here, and there's a link to that project for anyone that would like to take a further look at it. As we add projects to the funding list, for example, the recently approved Parks Civic Rec, that will be added to this, and the balance will be deducted accordingly when we receive those funds and the grant application from Norfolk County. So again, open for more suggestions. We try to keep it as simple, and you know, the matrix speaks for itself. These numbers will change as the balances change, but it gives a real-time snapshot of what's going on and the full transparency as to how funds are coming in and how they're being spent by the town.
And so, Mr. Denny, this would be a link from the town website onto this site? Is that how it would work?
Correct, yeah. If you go to townofmilton.org and you look down the bottom, we have the ClearGov link, which is our financial software, our transparency software. Embedded in that is this link to any projects that are going on in town. And we have a specific link to the American Rescue Plan Act funding allocation.
Okay, all right, thank you. Any discussion on this item? Questions or comments? Mr. Zulus.
Oh, I should have mentioned this before, but Mike, under the amount received from Norfolk County, when we have the asterisk and we say that it's net the 3%, we might add on to that asterisk explanation that it is subject to authorization, subject to application with the county and authorization. So, in other words, I think we try to make clear that we don't actually have the money, that it's subject to these projects getting approved. So that's the only thought that I have.
Yeah, no, and that's great, Mike. It is here in small letters. We should probably pronounce it a little more and move it up towards the asterisk. But again, this is all good, and I have to thank Rob and Karen that spent a good amount of time on this, because this is an essential part of the ARPA funding process, the transparency of this. But yeah, we can certainly pronounce that more and kind of marry it with the bullet up on top. Thank you.
Mr. Doyle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mike, could you just scroll down a little bit? No, the other way. I'm sorry, scroll up. I apologize. Okay, right there. It's a minor point, but we'll have different levels of understanding. And I would just like to suggest that the top line read American Rescue Plan Act ARPA funding allocation to Milton summary, so that nobody mistakes these being the allocations to particular projects.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Collins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Dennehy, could you just scroll down a little bit more for a minute? And I can always take a look at this later. And I was just wondering, as funds get allocated, like the 1 million, is there a way to capture those numbers so that, because people, when they see that first terrific grid with the allocations, you know, they may think that we still have that money and it hasn't been allocated. So I was just wondering about how we might capture that just in numbers. You know, I like the 3 numbers at the top. Adding a 4th number might be confusing, but I'm sure Ms. Praval, you know, and you and Mr. Mallett could probably come up with something. I just, as it's allocated, I'm just wondering how people can understand that, so they don't keep coming with suggestions, wonderful suggestions, but when we don't have any more funds or we don't have enough funds.
No, good idea, because it is a bit misleading there that we've got 1.444 when we don't really, right? It's net of the 1 million that we've used. We tried to put that in words down below, but I agree. I think the matrix up here could be a little more robust to let people
I
scroll.
think probably that 4th column could be the unspent balance, you know, because we don't the amount received, anyone can get the 4th column just by subtracting column 3 from column 2. So I don't really think we need that. I would make that the unspent balance. And then, you know, take the million out of the first line so that it just shows 444,060 as of 11/3. But as more projects get approved, just update that.
Okay.
Yeah. Maybe not unspent, but unapproved or.
Right, or unallocated, or I don't know what it would be, but something, but it's great. And I really appreciate all your efforts on this. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and again, the credit goes to Rob Mallett and Karen Praval, and I will certainly pass all of this very relevant stuff on to them so that it is as fully transparent as it can be. We try to keep away from, as many of you know, some of these products limit the amount of characters you can use down below, and the wordier we get, the less characters we have available. So I think we can tighten this up, certainly with everything I've heard here this evening.
Well, I agree that it looks very good and it's very transparent and will help people understand what's available and what the process is and what we've spent already and what the process has been. Okay, is there anything else on this topic before we go on to the next item? Okay, thank you, Mr. Dennehy.
Thank you.
Item 7 is approval of a letter to the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. We talked at a prior meeting about supporting the Neponset Rivers listing on the Superfund site. The Conservation Commission had also taken a position in support, and we talked about submitting a letter. Mr. Doyle, I believe, is the one who had drafted the letter for us. And thank you for that, Arthur. And we have a draft in our materials for this evening. Thought would be that we could approve this and ask the full board to sign it and get this tonight. The deadline is the 8th, Arthur?
It is due by the 8th in Washington, D.C. And it can be transmitted both electronically and by hot mail, snail mail, whatever term we want to use for the conventional mailing.
Yeah, maybe we submit it both electronically and follow it up with a hard copy.
I agree.
Okay. So if anyone has any comments on the letter, we should identify them. I know it's just a typo in the 3rd paragraph. The word as should be has in the 2nd line. But I thought it was a great letter. So thank you, Arthur, for your efforts to put this together and to write it for us. Mr. Zulus.
Madam Chair, I'll move to approve. Madam Chair, if it please, Chair, I'll move to approve and sign a letter to the United States Environmental Protection Agency in support of the Neponset River as a candidate for designation on the Superfund National Priorities List. And just as a, so that's the motion. Oh, go ahead.
Do we have a
Go ahead.
second motion?
Go ahead, Melinda.
Seconded.
Okay. All right, the motion is made and seconded. Mr. Zulus.
And then my question is I don't remember when looking at the letter, did we intend to all sign it, or is it going to be signed by all of us, or we having
That's how
Mr.
it's
Denny
set up.
sign it, or?
That's how it's set up. The thinking was we would all sign it. If that's
Okay,
possible.
great.
I know that
So-
means everybody getting into town hall in the next day or so to get it signed.
Can we authorize electronic signatures on our behalf?
We can. I mean, I thought the electronic signatures didn't come out very clearly on our letter to the FAA. Just the quality of it wasn't very good, but we could do that. We could try to fix that and see if there's a way to make it a little bit clearer.
Fair enough. I'll get into town hall and sign it.
Mr. Doyle had drafted it for the chair to sign, but I thought it might make more sense for the full board to sign it. But that's an option too, if we have difficulty with everyone getting up to town hall to sign it. Okay, so we have the motion made and seconded. Any other discussion? Sounds like we're all going to go into town hall and sign. Okay, then all in favor of the motion, Mr. Doyle,
Yes.
Mr. Zulus. You're on mute.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Ms. Collins.
Yes.
And myself, yes. Okay. Thank you again to Mr. Doyle, and thank you to Lynn for getting this letter ready for us. Item 8 relates to the fire station building project, relates to Eversource applications, and I'm going to be recused on this item, and I'll ask Mr. Doyle to chair this item. And then I will return afterwards. Thank you, Mr. Doyle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll open the floor for discussion. Mr. Dennehy, do you want to introduce this, please?
Certainly, yeah. So what's in front of the board tonight, it's a pretty simple process. So the Fire Building Committee and its new OPM, Owners Project Manager, Vertex, is suggesting that we fill out these electric service work orders with Eversource. There's 3 applications in front of you tonight. I'm going to remove 432 Adams Street. The town does not own 432 Adams Street yet, so we cannot approve an electric service work order to that location, but we'll be coming back to you with that. So in front of you tonight is 815 Blue Hill Avenue, which is the Atherton Street Fire Station, and 515 Canton Avenue, which is fire headquarters. So essentially, the Fire Building Committee and the Owners Project Manager is looking for these applications to be submitted so they can get potential costs to the town for services in order to update their project budget. It's that simple. So we've added the town's tax ID number and the 2 current account numbers, Eversource account numbers, to these work orders, and we will be submitting them to Eversource with the select board's permission.
Any questions from board members? Do we have a motion to approve?
I move to approve the applications for the Atherton Street Station and the fire headquarters for Eversource.
Thank you, Ms. Collins. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Zulus. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Zulus,
Yes.
Mrs. Collins,
Yes.
Mr. Doyle, yes. Thank you all. One follow-up question. Mr. Denny, do you need any authorization for signing?
No, town council just wanted the select board to approve this evening. I will be sending these 2 work order applications to Dan Clark and Brian Walsh at the Fire Building Committee, and Brian Jarvis, who is the Owners Project Manager for Vertex.
Thank you. Let's bring back our chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Doyle. Item 9 is meeting minutes, October 13th and October 25th. Has everyone had a chance to review them? Lynn DiNapoli sent around revised versions today, which had minor changes. Does anyone need more time to review them? Or are we able to act on them, or either one of them or both this evening?
I thought both were fine, Madam Chair.
Okay, then would anyone like to make a motion?
I move to approve meeting minutes from October 13th and October 25th, 2021.
Second,
Okay, well, any discussion? All in favor, Mr. Doyle,
Yes,
Mr. Zulus,
yes.
Ms. Collins,
Yes.
and myself, yes. Okay, thank you. Future agenda items and meetings, we're scheduled now to meet on November 10th as our next regular meeting. And Mr. Dennehy circulated an email asking if everyone will be available on the 17th because the following week is Thanksgiving week. I don't recall if everyone had responded, but does that date work for everyone? 17th, which is a Wednesday evening? Okay. I don't know about Mr. Wells. Did he respond to you, Mr. Dennehy? Is that?
That does work for him, Madam Chair.
Okay,
Yes.
good. So why don't we go with those two dates, and the 10th and the 17th will be our two regular meetings in the month of November. Anyway, and if there's any future agenda items, we could go over them now, or please notify Mr. Dennehy or Mr. Napoli.
If
Hearing
I
none?
could just mention one, Madam Chair.
Yes.
There was a slight technicality from the Secretary of State's office regarding the re-precincting of voters' precincts. It's very tough to say. I'm sure I butchered that. But she wants to come back in next Wednesday for a subsequent vote on that item.
Okay. Is that enough time for her to do it? Is it more time sensitive than that?
No, so thank you for asking. She did get approval from the Secretary of State, and the November 10th date will work.
Okay.
great.
All right. Is there anything else for future agenda items? Mr. Zulus.
Just while I think of it, Madam Chair, and I mentioned it a couple of weeks back, at one of these meetings, if we could have an executive session to consider potential litigation against the MBTA with respect to the stairs at the Milton Village MBTA stop.
Okay, and if there's, Mr. Doyle?
Madam Chair, November 10 is right on the cusp of November 11, Veterans Day. And we might want to mention the fact that we will have a town recognition at the gazebo at Town Hall on November 11th. I don't know if Mr. Dennehy wants to add anything to that or any other.
November 11th at 11 a.m. I did receive a question about the parade not being held this year, and I believe that's like Memorial Day was for COVID reasons. It was going to be a more limited ceremony, but Mr. Dennehy, if there's anything you want to add about Veterans Day.
No, just that it's 11 o'clock on that Thursday. Yeah.
At Town Hall. At the
Correct. Yeah, that is correct.
Okay,
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Doyle. All right, then do we have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Collins. All in favor, Mr. Doyle,
Yes.
Mr. Zulus,
Yes.
Ms. Collins,
Yes.
and myself, yes. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.